Pain and suffering are universal realities of our human existence. And it brings up the question, how can we deal with pain in a meaningful way? I think that, today I want to talk about 3 ways that the Eucharist comforts us. Pain, how can we give meaning to our pain and to our suffering? Pain receives meaning when it connects us with others. Pain, it gives us a lot of times the sensation that we're alone, that we're isolated. But when we're able to see that everybody experiences pain and suffering, well, then we're able to connect. We're able to connect at a more human level. When we're alone in our suffering, we lose all sense of meaning, right? And we feel like our suffering is just, it's just that. It's just suffering, and it separates us from those who are around us. We're looking for a friend, somebody who can sustain us in those bitter moments. And Jesus is somebody who understands pain and suffering better than anyone, since he underwent it first. Jesus is the one who sustains us through the gift of the Eucharist. How does the Eucharist sustain us in the Catholic faith, in the Christian faith? It is a sacrament, probably the one that is most familiar to us as Catholics. We're aware of baptism, right? We've all been invited to a celebration of baptism. We might not remember our own baptism, but regardless, it's something that we don't experience nearly as frequently as the Eucharist. We know about confirmation. Maybe remember our confirmation, probably a little bit older, 8th grade, high school, whatever it might be. But confirmation as well is something that, it's a sacrament we receive once in our life, and that's it. But the Eucharist is something we celebrate every Sunday, and hopefully even more often. Through the Eucharist, Jesus invites us to lean on him, to find in him our strength, to find in him our sure support. He wants to sustain us. He wants to prop us up. Not only did God create us, he maintains our existence through his providence. Now, to understand how the Eucharist can sustain us, we need to know what we mean by sacrament. So what is a sacrament? In Latin, we can have the definition, signum sacro sanctum efficax gratiae. It is a holy sign that causes grace to come about. So one of the things that I love about the sacraments is that the sacraments always give us God's grace, right? It's something that always happens every time we receive the sacrament. It's not the only way that God can give us his grace, but it is a way that he always gives grace. And what is grace? Grace is a gift freely given. Gratia est gratis data. Grace is freely given. Gratis, means free. In a sacrament, it's something, we could say it's something intangible, or something we can see, or something we can perceive somehow with our senses, but it speaks of an invisible and intangible reality. The baptism, the water is poured over our heads, but what's actually happening is we're becoming sons and daughters of God, and that's something that we can't see, we can't perceive with our natural senses. In church language, we often hear of the Eucharist as the source and summit of Christian life. What does this mean? Everything comes from the Eucharist. It is the source. Just so you can think of a brook or a river, and a lot of times it's fed by underground springs that are coming out. It's water that's trapped underground, and it comes up maybe with a little bit of force, with a little bit of freshness, and feeds that brook. So the Eucharist is the source of our Christian life. And then it's also the summit. It's also our goal. When you're summiting a mountain, when you're walking up the mountain all day long, and when you reach the summit where there's that sense of accomplishment, and you're able to enjoy the beautiful view, and you know that you've done something important. Well, the Eucharist is also where we're going. You can think of so many mountaintop experiences that are recorded in the Bible. We can think of Mount Tabor, we can think about Mount Horeb, Mount Sinai, different moments where different men of the Bible encountered God. Well, often it happens on the top of the mountain. So the Eucharist is for us that spiritual mountain where we are able to contact Christ. And so how does Christ console us? How does he comfort us in the Eucharist? Well, we can think of the Eucharist as a sacrament of communion, of contact, and of contemplation. A sign of communion. The Eucharist is a sign of communion. Communion means that various parts are coming together, right? So a union of different things. And they come together to form a new unity. Through the Eucharist, we enter mystical communion with the other members of the Church. This means that we do not join physically, but we are being created into something new that is truly united. We are one body because we partake of the one bread. That's why symbolically sometimes it's even nice when we're all able to receive from the host that the priest offers, right? And so sometimes you'll see these huge hosts that are easily broken up into a lot of smaller pieces because it's a symbolism of that unity that is achieved through the Eucharist. So it's a sign of communion. The Eucharist is a sign that God is active and present in the world. He cares about us and what happens in our world. He's not this far off, immovable mover. He's not, just kind of observing from the outside, the great watchmaker. No, he's a God who wants to come in and interact with us in our lives, in our world. The Eucharist gives us real contact with God. The Eucharist allows us to get into contact with God in a real way. We say that Christ is sacramentally present in the Eucharist, and this is a real presence. It's not, the same. It's not the same as other types of presence. We know that he's present in the liturgy. It's a very special presence that we experience. He is there really, body, blood, soul, and divinity. What we see are bread and wine, but our senses deceive us. Just think of when you watch a magic trick and you're surprised because maybe you were led to look at something that wasn't really what was going on. Well, the Eucharist, a little bit like that. Obviously, not magic, but yes, a reality that we're not able to fully perceive with our senses. Once the priest pronounces the words of consecration over the bread and wine, Jesus is truly present. Jesus is there. And that's something that's so special. And even when the priest says the word, he says, "This is my body." And it's kind of, it's here. I remember once hearing a priest who had visited the Holy Land, and he said that the word of the Holy Land is "ik" in Latin, which means here, because every place you go in the Holy Land, you can say Jesus was here, and this is what Jesus did here. Here. Well, that here becomes universal through the Eucharist, because when the priest is offering the Eucharist, Christ is here. And that's something powerful and something that we should all learn to appreciate. And finally, we see that the Eucharist is a contemplation of future realities. We are looking forward to heaven already, but not yet. We want to get to heaven, but we might want to give it still a little bit of time. Heaven is waiting for us. We want to go there, but not quite yet. So we look forward to heaven. In heaven, we will experience communion with Christ. Nothing will separate us from him. All of our sufferings, all of our difficulties, in heaven, that's all melted away. So we see that the Eucharist really is a sign of communion, something that brings us together. We see that the Eucharist gives us real contact with God, that we're able to come into contact, communicate with him. And we see that the Eucharist leads us to the contemplation of future things, of heavenly things. And these are powerful ways that Christ can really penetrate our lives. And so how do we make this practical? How do we lead this into our daily lives? Well, I would invite you, it's a great thing to make visits to the Eucharist, or maybe even just before or after Mass, you're able to spend a little bit of time in front of the tabernacle. A lot of times they're like, well, what do I do? I don't know what to say. Well, take these ideas of communion, of contact with God, and of contemplating future realities, and talk about our love with that. And you just kind of are spending time with him, and let him know your heart. You want to be with him, he wants to be with you. May the Eucharist comfort you in your own sorrows and lead you to everlasting joy. God bless.